captain yuko tayari kuchangia, yani wakili ni sawa, lakini the common sense edition live and money. If he wants to say something about it, he'll say it. Isaac Kabur nasema money from LD. Asante sana mtu wa Hobbit. It's good to see you Isaac Kabur. Farid Faraja, congratulations Jerry, may the Almighty bless you. Samuel Kigera logged in from Berlin. New people inspire my morning. Thank you so much Samuel Kigera all the way from Berlin, Germany. Unajua hii ni show bab kubwa.
Hii show ni international bitalk. Unajua vile vile huwa niko na watu wana
si nani natufuata hapa nyuma.
Iko watu wanatuangia messages kunieleza nizungumze mambo fulani. Na sasa nataka kwanza tujulie, unajua watu walifanya mtihani
kabisa
na Magoha kupatia watoto time ya kurelax. 2 weeks after they've left school, he already announced the results. And you know it's very depressing, you know. 143,044 qualified to join university. That's 19%. Actually 19.1. So that means the rest of the group 81%. And you remember what I remember the words he said. Oh, the rest will join TVET or what politics. I mean, let's be serious about this country. We've talked about here business in this country, and we've talked about MSMEs. They employ 96% of the people in this country. And we are focusing on the few guys who are going to graduate and start walking around in brown envelopes, looking for jobs, but they can't work.
Yes.
And let me talk about the work I want to talk about today, because I've really been very keen on this subject. And you'll allow me to even mention some people because they've contributed to the debate that I raised.
Please, go ahead.
And we've talked about, Jerry has said, we have a problem with invigorating our arts and culture, our creative industry. Okay, we've got one young person, because I call him young because he's younger than me, Churchill Dabuki. How many of the artists in this country have gone through his hands and they've now begun to earn something, including some of our friends, and you know them, you know. And it's very, very important to realize that the creative industry, the laugh industry, you know, you've got to make people laugh. It's not easy. I have tried it, Bitalk, by the way. I used to act when I was in the university.
Oh, yeah.
It's not very easy. It's very difficult, and some people think it's a joke. But day in and day out, you see people who go out of their way to become creative, use their talents, and create value for our society. And this is a very important aspect of our culture and of arts and the creative industries. And the government is not putting enough infrastructure. Apart from the Kenya National Theatre, which other place do you know in Nairobi where somebody can go in an evening? You know, I don't want to mention the ones that are run by foreigners, because it's not our business to promote foreign cultures. You know, we need to promote our own. We've talked about Bombers of Kenya. It's state run. I mean, we know a lot of people come even to where you come from in Rift Valley, the counties of champions. You know, the home of champions.
Home of champions.
You know,
the city of champions.
Yes. And you see, we're not promoting our sports. You can't. There is no. I don't know whether there is somewhere you can go in Nairobi and see the photographs of the sages who've ran and made history for this country. You know, so we have Eliud Kipchoge running today. After 5 years, we've all forgotten him because we'll forget. We've already forgotten many other people like Moses Tanui. You know, we've gotten Kinagoge. We no longer talk about them. You know, Kipchoge Keino. I mean, we need to be very serious about this, you know, and these are what we should be promoting as a country. I am looking at Aiba, who is now ailing in hospital. The man who is
now pampering with Harambes.
Yes, you know, pampering with Harambes. And we've got a state, because we concentrate too much on things which do not matter. Politics. Yet these politicians, I want to say something, Bitalk. You know, politics only benefits one side of life. It only benefits politicians. It doesn't benefit the voters at all. Your work after you voted and the guy has gotten power, you become irrelevant until the next election. And this is what our young people need to know. And we need to talk to them that there are things that have made other countries become very rich. How many people visit the Holy Land? We've got churches competing in Kenya to take people to Israel through Egypt. Egyptology, you know, people are studying excavations to looking for those mummies and telling us the history of those people. But where is our history ourselves? We've got museums. There is a museum in Nandi for Koitalel Samoei. You know, that is something we should have a link in Nairobi showing people so that people know where to visit. Now, we've got Waiyaki who fought in Kiambu, in Kikuyu. Where is a museum for Waiyaki? Is it anywhere? Have you heard about it?
No, it's just here.
I mean, what is the state? What is the state doing about this? And I'm also challenging the young people. You've got a BA in history and anthropology. Professor Gugi Wathiongo, who no longer lives in this country, started Kamerodho Center, where he was teaching the local people art. Kamerodho Center was not in Nairobi, but the state even closed it because it was giving awareness to the people. And Gugi had begun to spread arts and culture to other communities. Okay, so what are our people doing? Because I'm talking about this because having visited other countries, I've realized that countries make a lot of money out of investment that you almost call it no investment because people are doing things they've always done. Cuisine. Let's even talk about cuisine. How many times have you gone to eat food which is called Korean cuisine, the Ethiopian cuisine? Okay. We are eating Japanese restaurants, Chinese restaurants. So when am I going to eat in a cuisine where I need to get mursik and the ugali made of mursik, you know, and even that the dry cereal that used to be fermented and carried by the young herdsmen who would go herding in places like Baringo, the hot areas, and once it is mixed with some water, it becomes very good food. Have you seen it in Nairobi, Bitok? And we are here crying and saying there are no business opportunities in this country. Gastronomical tourism, the tourism of food, tourism
of the stomach.
Gastronomical tourism is one of the biggest earners of money in Europe because French want to have their cuisine. The Belgians have their cuisine. The Dutch have their cuisine. The English have their cuisine. What cuisines do we have here? Okay, we have Swahili dishes in Nairobi. Which other dishes do you know? Which other dishes? You know? Sasa unajua sasa. And we are talking of young people and they are living in schools and we need to guide them. Okay? That there are people who will want. That's why when you visit other cities, you visit cities in Belgium and in France, and you're told there is exclusive Moroccan cuisine. I mean, there are Moroccans who've been imported into those countries simply to make Moroccan dishes. And I have been there. And I want to say this, I've been there with even 2 Kenyan governors. You know, before 2017. And those 2 governors, by the way, were re-elected. I will not mention them because I know the both of them. And I found it interesting that we went to have lunch in those places. And I don't know whether they picked anything. Whether they've picked anything that is something they would promote in their country, in their counties, and in the country, because that is what makes a culture vibrant. It's what makes people move. And then we've got also the empire builders, the guys who built empires in the past. What is this? What are the things that we're importing? Almost everything from China. We're importing furniture. We're importing even cookware, you know, pottery. We're importing everything. Did the Chinese make these things yesterday? Let me give you the instances. Genghis Khan, who was the architect of modern China, did several things. When he would capture new territory, there are several people he did not have time for. He did not have time for aristocrats because he would say they have no time for warriors. In fact, he would say that hereditary power, those who inherit power from their fathers, are of very little use to society. So he would exterminate them.
How do you tunaita Kenya nini?
How do you tunaita dynasties? Well, but that was now history, you know, that he knew that he would not build, because he would say that those dynasties and hereditary power, those are simply idle aristocrats. I mean, they nothing to build. Yeah, they have nothing to build because they got power, they inherited power, and they have no reason to build anything. And therefore, he would do a number of things whenever he got new territory. He would keep a number of people, people who are merchants, guys who could run camels, guys who spoke multiple languages. Very important to him because it means he could communicate to the outside world. So we are touching on the things that matter to Kenyans.
And they could spy.
And they could spy. How many of our children who left high school can speak any other language except English, Swahili, and their mother tongue? And some of our parents are even very wrong because they do not want to teach their children their mother tongue. You're denying them a heritage. But Genghis Khan would not deny that. He would want people who spoke multiple languages, because even if he conquered new territory, he knew he needed to talk to those people. And he used to say, if you want to talk to people, to the hearts of the people and the minds, you speak to their language. And now, then he would go and say there are several other people he needed to safeguard. One of them are smiths. Guys who create things, guys who forge items from iron, working metals, potters, carpenters, furniture makers, weavers, leather workers, dyers, guys who color fabric, miners, paper makers, glass blowers. I mean, we import a lot of glass from those countries. No, not so, Bitok?
Yes.
Tailors, jewelers, musicians, barbers, people who actually make hairstyles. Very, very important. Singers, entertainers, and cooks. This is now you begin to understand why China has dominated the world in those industries. We are importing furniture. We even visit their restaurants to eat their food. We are importing their leather belts. Why? Because these are things that have been built over centuries. But what do we have? Everybody in Kenya wants to go to a college and study some arts course. This is the knowledge we need to be thinking about. That the future is in the foundry works. The future is in smiths. The future is in carpentry. Why are we talking of very smooth tables from those countries? Because they've built that over centuries. Yes. And that is why those are the classes of industry they promote. They're not, yes, they have artists, and they have artists too. They have scientists who are doing great things. But remember, what is this that we majorly import from those countries? We're importing things that are made by artisans and craftsmen. And that is what they promote. And that's why their polytechnics, technical institutes, are the most famous in the world. And this is what we should be focusing on in our country. Not everybody is going to fit to have a degree, because we need people who can work and create. We need people who can turn metal, who can convert raw metal and heavy iron into tools. We need people who can convert that into pots. We should not be importing some things. We should not be importing furniture. We should not be importing. Be importing knives. It's very sad, Bitok. Yet, before even the coming of the colonizers, your ancestors and my ancestors made spears. Where is that skill? Imeenda wapi? Because what the British and other colonizers did when they came to Africa, because they wanted to create a market, they killed our traditional industries. It is time to revive that knowledge. Those metal workers, the other day, we should even be ashamed of ourselves that we have got welders coming from China. Welders, Bitok. Welders, because we cannot do it ourselves. But we have young people walking around with brown envelopes saying, I need a job, but they cannot work. And I have said it before in this show, there is a lot of work in this country, but there are no jobs. And I say this as a person who is also an investor, that sometimes I have to wait for foodies, masons, painters. You actually have to book, and electricians, because you can't get them. Because we've killed our technical institutes. We've turned them into universities. And let me challenge the universities. Jomo Kenyatta University of Science and Technology. Their biggest faculty now is the School of Human Resources Development. Excuse me? You are a University of Science and Technology, and you're busy teaching humanities and having the largest humanities faculty? The people who lead that university should actually be sacked. They should be ashamed of themselves. You cannot call yourself a University of Science and Technology, and the things you are teaching have nothing to do with science and technology. That should be the center of innovation, the center of creation, of scientific discovery. Let's go to Egerton University. Again, you have the same repetition. You have professors there, and I am challenging them, because I think either they do not know what to do with their knowledge. You are formed essentially to create knowledge, or to look for knowledge to deal with agriculture, with conversion of produce. in raw materials, into finished products. But what do we find there? Again, you're teaching humanities. Really? We should have specific. There are colleges like Kabete here in Nairobi. They were reserved specifically to teach those humanities. You know? And those are the places we should have. Universities in Kenya should specialize. Maseno University should be specializing in aquaculture, teaching about the fishing industry, the marine industry, the blue economy. But what are they teaching? History and anthropology. Really? I mean, this is the problem. And if there is one person who has said it, because he's a scientist. You remember there was a lot of criticism on our deputy president when he said we need to discontinue some of the courses in the universities. You remember the criticism he got?
Yes.
He said we need to discontinue some of the arts courses because they are expensive and they're adding no value to our capital markets. As you've heard, if the Chinese in the 13th century, Genghis Khan was talking about the things I've talked about, jewelers, smiths, welders, we're talking of the 14th century, and this is why they dominate the world today. And here we are busy telling young people to go and study business management where there is no business to manage.
Okay.
And these are the things we need to change, and we need to refocus our education system because our education system has done injustice to our young people, including the universities themselves. And I would want to challenge our CS for education because he's a professor, he's a scientist, he's a medic. Please, Professor Magoha, bring these universities to line. Let Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology concentrate on agriculture and technology. Let Maseno University concentrate on the blue economy and aquaculture. Let Technical University of Kenya, TUK, stop teaching humanities. Business courses and humanities. That is irrelevant. Let them talk about technology. That's where we should be having our young people. The guys challenging. We've got even primary school dropouts creating transmitter radio stations. Imagine. And we've got a professor who is striking, asking for a salary, and he's done nothing with his degree in electronics engineering. 4 degrees.
Hata hawezi funga transistor. Anyway, now, before we came live, you're talking about the wars between Israel and Palestine.
Yes.
And it seems to be escalating. This morning, before I came in, I was watching CNN, and I think it's getting crazier. Also, over the weekend, they bombed a media outlet building, which came and collapsed. And we keep wondering, what's really going on between Palestine and Israel?
You know, Bitok, there are historical issues in that land. And, you know, it is sad that coexistence and the communities existing together has become a mirage in that part of the world. It is not possible to wish away the fact that Israelis as a people should exist as a race and as a people. It is also not disputed that the Palestinians as a people and a race should exist. And that is the first recognition. But my biggest problem is that you have got extremism on both sides. There are extremists on the Palestinian side, particularly the groups like Hamas, okay? And they are precursors. We need not mention them. They are precursors that were there before them. And their thinking is that Israel has no right to exist. Neither Israelis do not have a right to exist as a people. Yet they have a right. It's like wishing away the Kurdistan people, the Kurd people. The Kurd people exist in Syria, in Turkey, Iraq, and also in Iran, in 4 countries. You cannot wish that away. In various countries, they have got to recognize that these are distinct and separate citizens and separate ethnicities. But they can exist in one country. And Iran, I want to commend Iran for that. Iran, which itself has recognized the Kurds minority to exist in its own country, now does not recognize the right of Israelis to exist. You know, that's a contradiction. And these are the people fueling war and conflict in the Middle East. Are you seeing the contradiction?
Yes.
That Iranians will support people who do not believe Israel should exist, but they themselves are recognizing the Kurd minority in their country. The Kurd minority is having trouble in Turkey. The Kurd minority is having trouble in Syria. But the Kurd minority now has almost a semi-autonomous state in Iraq. You see, the first recognition, if you want a peace in a country, is to recognize the right of the other people to exist as a nationality and as a people. And that should be the beginning. And the moment then you have nations, independent countries, which now support the kind of activities, because Hamas is incapable, it doesn't have the technology and the capability to make the kind of missiles and the weapons they are making to launch towards Israel. And when you launch those missiles to Israel, what are you doing? You're going to hit civilian areas. So you've made civilians your legitimate targets. Now, in the day you are fighting an asymmetrical war, you're making civilians your legitimate target. Then you give the state that has sworn to protect those civilians, you give them the rationale and the legitimacy to attack you in the manner in which they are attacking. But should be of concern, because I've seen a lot of people raise, why is a building housing media outlets
being bombed?
Yes. And Bitoka will tell you this, because I want to talk as a warrior, because I'm trained as a warrior, that actually terror is not spread by the acts of warriors, but terror is spread by the activities and the writing of scribes and scholars. That is something a lot of people in the media and journalists do not know. That what they write as scribes and scholars, that is what feeds the terrorist. Because if nobody broadcast what the terrorists did, the terrorists will stop doing what they are doing. That I know. Because if you want to win a war, then you must control, you not only need a strong army, you also need to control propaganda. And who is controlling propaganda from Gaza? We've got repeated media houses propagating and feeding the world only news from one side. For example, many of the missiles, over the 4,000 missiles that have been launched from Gaza towards Israelis, have been intercepted by the Iron Dome. But how many media houses ever report about the success of the Iron Dome? None. They actually want to report the incidence of the number of missiles that have been launched without reporting that the Iron Dome has saved a lot of people. That should tell you that somebody is simply feeding the propaganda for the terror. And that's why I've said scribes, and particularly the journalists today, should know that what they report, and scholars too, can really fan the flames of war and make a war not end. Because the moment you keep making one side feel they are succeeding, then it means that you continue feeling them. You create heroes out of nothing. Because in war we say that wars are not won, are not just won in the propaganda. They should also be won in the theaters of operation. And in the theaters of operation, when you launch missiles into civilian targets, into nothing. Because if you're fighting a proper war, if you consider yourself a warrior, then you face a fellow warrior. You don't face civilians. You don't throw things into civilians. But also scribes should know that when they give one-sided story in a conflict, they are fueling the flames of war. So it's of course not very good to hit civilian installations. But when a civilian installation, it is self-led, it's prowess and knowledge to support one side of the war, and at the same time,
so you feel Israel is right
itself of its civilian character. For example, if you're one side, even a media house, and you're supporting one side of the war, then you divest yourself of your civilian character. You become a legitimate target for the side that feels that you are misreporting. That is what scribes should know. And that's why sometimes you will hear saying, independence of the media. In a theater of operation, you don't talk about independence of the media. You talk about reporting fairly. And peace is a matter of diplomats. It's not a matter of scribes and politicians. It's left to diplomats. And when diplomats talk peace, then the warriors listen. But the warriors will not listen when scribes keep on promoting one side of the war, of a conflict, because let me call it a conflict. But at the same time, any side that keeps on hitting civilian targets does not even deserve to be called. Does not even deserve to be called a military group, because you cannot be throwing. If you call yourself a warrior and you're hitting at civilians, then you worse than you actually essentially a criminal. You are a bandit. Yes, because you are hitting soft targets, and that's what Hamas is doing. So when you see the kind of response that Israel does, Israeli politicians, they also need to win the hearts and the minds of their people by showing that they are responding in a commensurate way. Sometimes they do not respond in a rather commensurate way, because they also hit civilian targets, and that deserves condemnation on both sides. But I would urge the guys who are also throwing missiles from Gaza to appreciate the fact that if you continue hitting soft targets, please expect the kind of firepower that we are seeing from the other side.
Okay,
yes.
So they have you feel Israel is justified to hit on the establishment.
It's not justified at hitting
But it is
civilian
war.
targets.
Okay,
But in this conflict, there are people fueling it. And part of the people fueling it are what I have said, scholars and scribes. And those scholars and scribes, because of their actions, have divested themselves of their civilian character, and therefore have been rendered legitimate targets of the Israel Defense Forces. Yes.
so ikubalike na maana hiyo. Now, what happens to Palestinians? Now, what is the future?
It's a sad situation, Bitok, because personally, I would wish there are talks and decisions for our... there has been a talk there. I follow the politics of the Middle East, because there has been a continuous talk of the two-state solution. Two-state solution, where Palestine begins to exist as a state. But why has Israel and many people, especially even the people in the United Nations Security Council, opposed that solution? Because there are also countries that support Palestine, the Palestinian cause. But I have told you one of them is Iran, which does not believe that Israel ought to exist. That means then...
So who is where? The Palestinians are in Israel, or the Israelis are in Palestine?
I mean, you see, the whole land is land of Palestine. Is the land of Palestine.
The whole land belongs to
Palestine. The whole land.
So the Israelites are visitors in Palestine?
No, they're not visitors. All of them belong to that land. If you read the history of that place, we've got people who are named, other names, Hittites, the Moabites, the Palestinians, the Samaritans. All these people later on have emerged as different communities. There are those who call themselves Palestinians, and then there are those who call themselves Israelis. Now, and I like to make this distinction, because there are also people who bring in religion.
Yes.
Being Jewish and being a Judaist, that's a religion. Being Muslim, that's a religion. I like to separate those two. Because if you go to Israel, there is the Armenian quarter in Jerusalem. There is a Christian quarter. There is an Arab/Palestinian quarter. So there are other nationalities in Jerusalem. So we always cannot always talk about... When we talk about a two-state solution, we need to agree also that there are minorities with rights in the two places. In what is called... If you look at sometimes... and I also fought Israeli Palestinians. When they want to make it sound like the Palestinians have no right to exist in that land, you know what they say? Where they start calling West Bank Judea and Sumeria, because it's simply what they are saying is that land is the traditional Israeli land. But you also have to recognize that those communities have existed there. And even during the Ottoman Empire, there were still those quarters. Armenians who are Christians, isn't it? Orthodox Christians. Then you've got the Christian quarter, where it was full of, again, Catholics. Remember Kina St. Paul. I also say to have been in Jerusalem. Now, and then you have got the Islamic or the Arab quarter. That simply tells you that those communities have existed over centuries, hundreds of years together. So the first thing that I would urge both sides, both the Palestinian politicians and the Israeli politicians, is to recognize the rights of each other to exist as a people and a race. And races and nationalities. Once they recognize that, then we can start talking about a two-state solution. And you would recognize that apparently the West Bank has been peaceful because it is not, it is Hamas, which now Hamas does not believe in the right of Israel to exist, which governs Gaza. West Bank is governed by the Palestinian Authority, okay, which is a different which is a different political outfit. And that has mellowed down. It already recognized the right of Israel to exist.
Okay.
And that is the beginning of a solution in that place. But I have a problem because in Kenya, you also have people take sides because of religion. Yes. And I urge them that religion is neither here nor there. Because you recognize when you talk about you're supporting this side because of a religion, please know they are also religious.
Some of the great nation of Israel shall never be defeated.
Yes.
Yeah, we Christians have to.
Okay.
The guys banajai Peter Mulolongo.
Yes. and you've not been there. You also need to recognize the rights of minorities, religious minorities to exist. I've mentioned Armenians, I've mentioned the Christians, I've also mentioned there have been distinct Arab minorities even in the city of Jerusalem for centuries. Yes. And you see, there are also Jewish minorities even in other places. They've been there even in Yemen. They've been there in Morocco. They've been there even in Ethiopia. They've been there in Europe. Okay? And you see, anytime, and Israelis have had a very checkered history. Remember, they were forced out of the land. I mean, when I hear some people say the Israelis are invaders there, you need to know what happened during the 12th and between the 12th and the 15th centuries when the Ottomans took charge of that region. The Israelis were dispersed into various lands. They became refugees. Okay? And then when they became refugees, are we saying that they do not have a distinct right of return? They have a distinct right of return. And they exercise their right of return against hostile nations. And we've seen today Egypt recognize the right of Israel to exist. Even Qatar did sign a treaty the other day with Israel. Even Saudi Arabia. So there has been efforts going on. Okay? Egypt for a long time already, and Anwar Sadat, the former president of Egypt, paid with his life for recognizing the right of Israel to exist as a nation. So we need to realize that there has been efforts to have peace in that place. But I would also add those in other parts of the world funding the conflict because of religion to just stay away. Because religion brings people, you have to be hypnotized to believe in something. And you need to be irrational. Because most religious people, most religious heretics and people who believe deeply in religions and want to fight over religion, they are very irrational and very illogical in thought because they do not want to examine the realities of history. You can't just say I'm supporting Palestinians because they are Muslims. Who told you that they are only Muslims in Gaza? They are also Christian minorities.
Yes.
Even in West Bank. Who told you that in Israel they are only Jews? No. They are also religious minorities. So let us divorce religion out of this and first look at the nations, the peoples, nations and nationalities who live in that land of what is known as the larger Palestine or the larger Palestine. And even when we talk of Abrahamic religions, they all have their origins in Palestine, both Muslims and Christians, the Baha'is, and all other religions that claim to have Abraham as their forefather. As their forefather. And why should these people be fighting if they actually believe? Why should they even be fighting on religious basis if they believe that they all have Abraham as their forefather? Actually, they should be united against the rest of the world. But unfortunately, as Abrahamists, they are the ones they actually should be talking closer. Yes, because the Torah in Judaism is also the same Torah in Islam. Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, also since this morning I was having, just watching again what's going on CNN, and America is being pressured to give a stand, and is actually being accused of financing and giving aid to Israel to finish Palestine. I don't know if you feel is there any external influence on the war between Palestine and Israel?
Bitok, if you look at the history of America, you have to remember there is something I've talked here about civilizations. When Jews left Palestine and went to Europe to become refugees in Spain, in Portugal, in Germany, in Bulgaria, in the whole of Europe, what did they become? They became smiths. They became Smiths. They be called goldsmiths. You remember even during the time of the Second World War, what was the beef that the Germans and particularly the party, the Nazi party, what beef did it have with them? Because they had become merchants. They had become merchants. They had become goldsmiths. So they controlled trade. They controlled trade. They controlled, and once you control trade, it also means you will control banking. By extension, because you are the one who is doing what with money changing. And when these people became money changers, that means that they became, historically they got knowledge into the banking and merchant, and consequently they have controlled that part of industry in a lot of countries in the world, including the United States, including Russia, and including many parts of Europe. And this has always been a trouble. And essentially, what that means is that in the US, you have got a very big constituency and a very powerful lobby for the Jewish cause. Okay, for the Jewish cause. Some people would want to call it the Zionist cause, which I don't like using because I don't like getting into issues of religious extremism and intolerance. So that means that if those people control the levers of power because of trade and money, they have a great influence on the state. And we've talked, I've told you, the state has a lot of respect on people who pay taxes. So if you're controlling banking, if you're controlling trade and mercantilism, that's the movement of goods around the globe. What does that mean? What you have a lot of power play vis-a-vis the state. In fact, you even have companies that have, we call them quasi-state bodies. We have one emerging in Kenya called Safaricom. It is so powerful that it can bring the state down, and you know that. If Safaricom decides to stop its mobile money today and switch off for 48 hours, there will be a riot on the state. Okay? So you've got what you call serious economic power being in the hands of people who are said to support Israel in Europe and the United States. And these lobbies are so powerful that they even determine who gets appointed to very powerful positions in that country. If you remember, and I want to take back to President Donald Trump. President Donald Trump, and I am not saying because I want to take sides in the American politics. President Donald Trump made sure that the peace efforts in the Middle East were becoming practical and realistic. And during his reign, there has been a conflict in the Middle East. In fact, he has not started a war against any other country during his reign. And one of the things we saw is serious efforts to create peace between Israel and the Arab nations and nations in the Arab League. Okay? And you remember the efforts he made, and those efforts between Qatar, between Bahrain and Israel. Those were all efforts of Donald Trump because he understands the lobby, the powerful lobby, the lobbyists in the US. So these lobbyists in the US are so powerful that an American government, in fact, I will tell you, it would be suicidal. In fact, it would be very difficult for a sitting American president to ignore those lobbyists. It is very difficult. And that is basically why it is being seen as if the American state is not moving. But these are Democrats in power. Democrats think inward in diplomacy, in international diplomacy. They don't think outward. We were with them here in 1994 during the Rwandan genocide. President Bill Clinton was in power. Did he intervene in Rwanda? No. That is what the world is forgetting. So why are they forgetting? That the Democratic Party in the US does not... What are they doing in Afghanistan today? What are they planning to do? They are withdrawing and allowing the militant Taliban and other militants to control territory, which they will again use to impose religious extremist ideology on the people. Are you seeing the difference? I think the world, and especially some people, and especially I want to talk to scholars and scribes, they forget too quickly that in the US, the people who are in power today, internationalism and globalization has never been part of the agenda. Their agenda is to think inward. And they think of the third and fourth generation rights for Americans, immigrants, the minorities, including some things we don't want to talk about in Africa. We are not interested in LGBTQ rights, are we? In Africa, is it a concern to Africa? But we saw even our own son, President Obama, when he came to Kenya, that becomes a very important topic for him to even ask our president to talk about LGBTQ. Is that something that is alive in Africa? Those are the things that concern the Democratic Party. So Middle East is really not part of their top on their agenda. Yes.
It's not one of the issues.
It's not one of the issues that they're handling.
All right, as we roll on the conversation, maybe now tukimbia kwa mambo ya watoto. Watoto now. The children have finished school. Wamaliza KCSE.
Yes.
Now they are now transitioning into adulthood.
Yes.
There seems to be also problems. There seems to be trouble in paradise for those children who don't stay with their fathers. Now children have been asked to go and bring IDs, copies of IDs or original IDs and do that. And the men are disappearing on their children.
Yeah, it's very sad, Bitok. And the other day I had a discussion with my own daughter who is now an adult. She turned 18 on 30th of April. And I told her I have a very soft spot for children. Because Bitok, I don't like talking about it, but part of my childhood when I was a teenage, I did not have it smooth because of decisions made by adults, not my own parents, but by other adults. Actually, if we were in a serious country, the adults who made the decisions should be in jail. But luckily for them, this is a country where impunity reigns. So they also exercise impunity for us. Actually, we were in a school setting, and a lot of young people suffered. And I don't like to talk about that school, but it is something that was very painful. That's why I have hold children in a special way. And I want to talk about the young adults who are transitioning into adulthood. You know, every child has a right to an identity. And I want to distinguish here between parental responsibility and identity. Those are two different things. There is a reason why we call you Gerard Bitok. Because Bitok
is my identity. Is
your identity.
Okay.
It is your identity. There is a reason you are given that name. There is a reason I carry the names that I carry. Because that's my identity. And I want to talk about this because it's a very challenging issue, particularly even to the mothers. Because you have people, children ordinarily, we've spoken about in this show, children ought to be gotten by those people who are rational, logical, and reasonable in a state of marriage or in a state of community of marriage or in a union which has a basic understanding. Because you remember we had somebody who passed on recently and he mentioned his wife and dedicated partners. And dedicated partners, we need to recognize that because our country also recognizes customary marriages which are potentially polygamous. Okay, so I understand that. So children, when they are born of two parents, if we're talking about identity, the identity in Kenya is paternal. That means it is on the father's side. And that is the name that the child should take ordinarily. But let's see the problem. When children are born out of people having fun, because that's also a challenge in our country. Some people want to have fun. They want to have unprotected sex, which I'm not a supporter of that. Because people who engage in premarital and protected sex many times do not want to own up to their own activities. And they will then want to deny that I didn't know. Okay? Both fathers and mothers. They should take responsibility for those actions because you bring people into this world. But where children are born and people have an understanding, and then the father says, okay, I will allow the child to carry my name, then it is incumbent upon that father to ensure that at the time of registration of birth, now, Bitok, did you know that? Because you are a father, I'm sure you know this. When your children were born, the place of father, the place of father in the birth notification, was it filled?
No, it wasn't.
It was left blank.
Yeah.
Why? You know why it was left blank?
Why?
Because it is only the mother who knows the source of her of the biological material she used to make the baby. Only the mother knows. So if the mother says the child belongs to XYZ, that is the name she will fill. And that is what mothers are.
So Wanderi unaweza kaa ukifikiria mtoto ni wako alafu ameenda amejaza ingine.
Yes, anaweza jaza sasa, si anajua pahali alitoa hizo alitoa raw material. Alitoa raw material sio lazima ikuwe yako. So once the mother feels the name of the person she believes is the father or the person she knows, and I want to use the word she believes because we also have irresponsible women who have multiple partners, and we've known some to have multiple partners even during their fertile period. So they may not know fully who is the father, but she may believe that so and so is the father. Once she feels that name, the person she believes or knows to be the father, then if that person at the time of registration of birth gives his copy of ID and the child registered in the name, then that child assumes that identity, that paternal identity. Now, the tragedy comes if the mothers, for example, for one reason or another, either gets married after that to a different person, or the mother who is married, properly married, and or had an understanding with the father of the child, and the child is registered with that father, then disagree along the way when the child is growing up. And when the child is turning 18, now you have a child with a birth certificate indicating that the father is XYZ. And that there is a requirement under the registration of Persons Act, which again requires the document, the source document that identifies you as a Kenyan is which one? When you are a child, it is a birth certificate. So if your birth certificate is reading that your father is XYZ, how do you expect a registration officer to register you with a different name as your identity? Will they give you an identity card with a different name? They will ask for your birth certificate, school leaving certificate, okay? They will also ask with a copy of ID of one of the parents, and they will want to register you with the way the citizenship database has you, because when you are a child you have no national identity card nor a passport. What you have is a birth certificate. And this is a tragedy, and children are facing trouble because some of the fathers mistake identity with parental responsibility. Gentlemen, once a child has gotten to 18 years, you don't have any responsibility. Your responsibility ended. Hata kama ulikuwa deadbeat, sasa huna kazi ingine. Mtoto ulilelewa na sisi wanaume wengine na mama yake. Tafadhali peana identity. Hiyo tu peke yake ndio utapeana, jina peke yake. Tafadhali peana jina. Do not deny if you deny the child upkeep and maintenance, unakataa pia na jina. Kwani wewe ni mwanaume aina gani? Peana photocopy ya kitambulisho. Wacha mtoto apate kitambulisho. Sasa kama tulikusaidia kulea mtoto, tusikusaidie pia kupeana jina. Yes.
Unachoma bana.
Si chome kutoka. Sasa kama ulisaidiwa kulelewa mtoto na wanaume wengine na mtoto ulipeana birth certificate, sasa jina tu peke yako ndio cost.
Unataka kunyimana. Na mtoto pia akipata hiyo jina kama amepisha miaka 18, to even support for a child to be supported by a parent after 18. Let me get into it because I know you will ask that. When the person is a young adult and they have attained 18, because your children also attain 18 bitok, they do not have an automatic right to be maintained. In fact, they should leave your house. Yes, after 18 you are an adult. The country recognizes you as an adult. That is why you can even before 18 you cannot go to help and ask for a loan. But after 18 you can apply for a loan. But can a parent be forced to continue maintaining a child or a young adult after 18? Yes. How? If the child is going to be in school, which will continue beyond the 18 years. And that's why university students ought to be maintained and to be assisted by their parents. But you have to go to court, be talked, by the way. If the parent is not willing, the child can only get an order. Not the mother. Get here. Not the mother.
The mother. If I determine, for example, my daughter who is 18, I'm not going to pay college fees. The mother cannot take me to court. It's the child. The child is now an adult. That's a young adult. They are the ones who are required by law to take me to court. And there is a famous case in Nakuru where a young law student took her biological father, whose name appeared in the birth certificate. Okay, she not only forced him to give her a copy of the ID to register for the national ID. I will not mention the names because they are protected, but she's now a lawyer. She also took him to court and got an order that he pays 75% of the fees in university. Hata mimi niliona hiyo mwanamume ni mkora. Mtoto umelelewa, amesoma, anataka kuwa mwanasheria. Sasa wewe akifika kitambulisho utapataki kupatiana jina, anakuambia hukulipa primary, hukulipa secondary, anakuambia sasa nisaidie 50% niingie university nikuwe mwanasheria. The father refused. The court ordered him to pay 75%. The mother also contributed. She also had to give 25%. Then after she completed the law school, university, she was supposed to go to Kenya School of Law. It's a reported case in the High Court. And the daughter now went back to court and said, the father said, mimi nimekulipia university 75% per year, siwezi lipa tena. The court told him, baba, no, hujamaliza kazi.
Bada kazi.
Education, huyu mtoto anataka kuwa mwanasheria. The requirements of mwanasheria in Kenya, engineers, medics, pharmacists, is that the training continues beyond university. Hata hiyo utalipa baba. So again, he was forced to pay 75% for Kenya School of Law. And that is the case that even these fathers, even those who think they are not going to support their children after 18, they should be worried that will happen. But in the event that, but then let me tell you, tell the men who are fearing to give identity, that responsibility can only be forced upon you after the age of 18 for the child, if you had already been responsible for the child before 18. Are we getting? That if you are not supporting the child before 18, you cannot be forced to support after 18. You get the difference? So there is a rider there. So that's why I'm telling these men, kama wewe hukuwa baba mzuri, tafadhali peana tu kitu moja, jina.
Peana jina peke yake.
Kama huwezi peana pesa ya fees, huwezi peana pesa ya chakula, pesa ya nguo, basi peana jina.
Na kuna wale ambao wanajificha pia. Unajua those guys who are hiding. Unajua in this dedicated partnership they are not so dedicated, so maybe they're hiding the proceeds of the horizontal activities. So ikifika za mahali watoto wanaanza kuitisha ID, hapo sasa unacheza kiaje? Labda unaficha kwa hii entity nyingine.
Sasa wajua hapa hakunanga mchezo. Hakuna hesabu naweza piga. Because one, I have said, if the mother, I have used two words. Because I have said the person the mother believes or knows to be the father.
If someone today shows up with you,
with
asking
my baby,
you for your ID.
Yes.
Asking for your ID.
Yes.
Watoto watano ama wanne.
Yes.
Unasema tunataka ID.
Yes.
Wewe ndiye msemekano ndiye baba yetu.
Yes.
Tunataka ID ya kwenda register kitambulisho.
Yes.
Inakwaje?
Tutaenda Mahambara tuangalie chebe DNA. Tutafanya kipimo pale. Na unajua
alafu itokee 99.9.
Ikitokea 99,
hii percent nyingine inabaki inakwanga.
Sikiza bitok. Mimi kama mtoto akitokea 99, mimi nitaweka mikono juu na tuko na pia na mwenzetu, tuko na rafiki yetu. Unakumbuka Dennis Itumbi aliwekwa kwa mitandao, ikasemekana amepuka. Alisemaje baada ya kusemekana mtoto ni wake? Mimi nimekubali.
Unakubali matokeo.
Unakubali matokeo.
Kuna cousin pia.
Na pia vile unasema hiyo kazi si kufanya peke yangu. Tulifanya na mama mtoto si pia alichangia. Unajua pia kuna kina mama hapa wanafikiri kwamba jukumu ni la baba peke yake. Hapana, hata wewe ulichangia. Ulikuwa pale kwa ile mchezo pale. Kwa ile mchezo mlikuwa pale. So kwa hivyo kama uko na pesa na baba hako na pesa, mnachangia nusu. Mnachangia 50%, mwingine 50% kwa kulea, kwa mambo ya malezi. Lakini kama sasa ni kupatiana jina, mimi nitapatiana jina. Na kama sikuweko wakati ya malezi na siku anajua, nitaomba mtoto msamaha, na pia vile nimsaidie kujikimu kimaisha akiwa kijana mdogo, yani young adult. Nitampea boost kidogo. Na niko na examples pia. Niko na mzee fulani mwenye alizaa mtoto akiwa polisi. Aliniambia alikuwa miaka 20. Mtoto alizaliwa akiwa miaka 20. Alafu mama yake hawakupatana. Baadaye akakuja kujua mtoto alienda shule na mama yake akaolewa, lakini wakati mtoto alikuwa mzima, kumbe mama aliandikisha yule mtoto ni wa huyu jamaa. Sasa huyu mtoto amekuja mpaka Murang'a, anatafuta jamaa zake. Akaambiwa baba yako ni fulani. Yule mtu nilishangaa sana, because wakina mama pia lazima waelewe. Bibi ya yule jamaa ni rafiki yangu, yule mzee ni rafiki yangu. Bibi yake ndiye kwanza aliniuliza, unajua rafiki yako ako na mtoto mwingine huko sehemu za pwani? Nikamwambia mimi nilisikia lakini sijui. Akaniambia hata huyo mtoto ni daktari saa hizi. Na huyo mtoto anafanana na baba yake hata kushida yule wetu wa kwanza. So the wife was very ready and said the young man is an adult and she's not going to fight with her husband. And so she accepted there is a new member of the family. He's an adult anyway. He's not coming to live with you.
Yes.
So she supported and told her husband, if this young man looks like you, looks like our son, please support him where he can. Yule jamaa aliniambia, sababu aliona aibu na pia Mungu amemjalia. Aliniambia mimi nilijisakanya kidogo nikatafuta 200,000. Nikaambia huyu kijana sasa umemaliza university. Unasoma. Mimi nakulipia hii wakati unaenda medical school, utafute pesa kidogo, ukifanya ile wanaita attachment, utafute pesa kidogo, unaweza nunua kagari kadogo kwenda. Today, up to day, that young man has remained part of that family. You get? So it is good to own up as a man, because I have also seen men who have worked very hard in life. They've been blessed with a lot of things, with a lot of riches. But at the time of their death, all their children are cabbages. Now people even ask, iko mahali mto alikuwa amezaa katoto kengine hapo nje. Tunaelewana?
Okoe jahazi.
Tuokoe jahazi. And we've talked about those families.
So this thing ni mzuri.
Yes, ni mzuri kama mtoto akitokea. Pia wewe umboost, because anaweza kuwa ndiye ataokoa ile DNA yako. Ama itazama na maji sababu wale ulilea pia wamekunywa maji ile ingine
okay. So anyway, what does the law say about identity of a child? Does it matter if the parents are married and living together or not?
No.
Lazima kuwe mnaishi pamoja ndio mtoto apate identity ama
it doesn't matter.
The child is an autonomous entity.
Yes, the child is an autonomous being, and that is why the child is protected by the state. Okay. And for the men who are busy saying they cannot give copies of their IDs, let me challenge them. You know, the other day some of them registered for Huduma. When they were registering for Huduma, weren't they giving copies of their ID? Passport. So nani anakwambia state does not have a copy of your ID? The state already has that information. So by refusing, in any case, you also every other day when you go to the state, hata ukienda kwa e-citizen si wako na copy. How did you register an e-citizen portal? You know you have to submit a copy of your ID and logbook if you have a car. Sasa na wewe unafikiri utakataa. One of those bodies will be told to give a copy of your ID to the mother of the child. Yes. It's only that a lot of people don't want to go through. There are difficulties. Then there are also emotions involved. And I've also met young adults Bitok who now hate their fathers. Wanachukia baba zao. Sababu baba sio tu kukataa kumlea. Alikataa pia na jina. Ni kitu baya sana. So you don't need to be living together. That's why the law recognizes that they are divorced couples, and divorced couples can remarry. And we gave an example here of people who are in public life. I mean, we know that Anne Mombi Kamodho was once Anne Mombi Waigoro. We also know that my senior colleague in the law was also married at one point to another person. But now they've come together. They have now what you call a hybrid family, a large family with children from different sides. But they are sensible people. I have even seen their children in social media from both sides. That is how sensible people behave. Because if I have children, those are children I came with from another relationship. If you have children, I need to recognize that they are autonomous and they have a right to exist. You know, in Kenya, we joke about this, Bitok. And that is why Article 53 of the Constitution had to be enacted to protect the right of the child to have an identity. And the state is actually required under Article 53 to go to any length to make sure the children has an identity. Yes.
Okay, so let me ask you, anyway, before I get to that, now let's talk about the requirements. What is required for the registration of a child's birth?
For birth, I said you need a birth notification.
And also an adult as well, who's turning 18.
Yes. If the child was born at hospital, the hospital will give a birth notification because those are agents of the Registrar of Births and Deaths. The other agents of the Registrar of Births and Deaths by appointment by law are assistant chiefs and chiefs. So if you are born in the village, your assistant chief and chief should be able to give a birth notification. And that is why hospitals give returns to the registrar. Chiefs and sub-chiefs also give returns to say watoto fulani wamezaliwa katika eneo langu. Tunaelewana? Yeah. And as I've said, once that is done, the registrar already knows that you exist. Now, some of the sub-chiefs and chiefs, pia, they neglect that duty, which is a very, very important duty, because that is the only way the state can even plan to know how many infants and young children have been born in an area. And I want to urge our people who've been given the job of assistant chiefs and chiefs. Tafadhali jameni muko na jukumu kubwa sana. ya kusisitiza kwamba lazima watoto wameandikishwa. Na lazima pia mupeane stakabadhi kwa wazazi wapya, because wale wazazi wamepata watoto nyumbani. Tunajua kuna wazazi wanazalia nyumbani kwa kukosa uwezo wa kwenda hospitali. Ama vile vile kuna fanyika pia dharura, mambo ya dharura. Sasa mtoto anazaliwa nyumbani. So ile birth notification ama ishara kwamba karatasi, stakabadhi ya ishara kwamba mtoto amezaliwa inaweza tolewa na hospitali ama pia na sub chief na chief. Na ikitolewa pia nchi inajua kwamba umepata. Sasa ukipata ile unapaswa kukaa na ile karatasi. Na sasa nataka nielezee kina mama hapa na kina baba wapya. Unapaswa kukaa na ile stakabadhi ya ishara kwa mtoto amezaliwa, yani birth notification. Sio muda umezidi miezi 6. Unapaswa baada ya miezi 6 unakibia haraka, sasa unapata stakabadhi ya uandikishaji rasmi kwamba mtoto amezaliwa. Cheti sasa. Yani birth certificate. Sasa inapaswa miezi 6 ikisha. Nataka nieleze hapa sababu kuna watu wananiambia baada ya miaka 5 bado wako na birth notification. Na ndio unaona sasa nchi ama taifa serikali imeanza kutumia sasa kusema mtoto asiingie shule kama hana ile cheti, sababu serikali imegundua kwamba wazazi wanakaa na ile stakabadhi ya ishara, wanafikiri hiyo ni birth certificate. Sasa mimi nawaomba wazazi pia wapeleke. Sasa mtoto akifikisha miaka 18 nimesema unahitaji kitambulisho ya kuonyesha mzazi mmoja. Vile vile unahitaji ile cheti kwamba umezaliwa, yani cheti cha uandikishaji, ile birth certificate. Na vile vile unahitaji pia ile karatasi stakabadhi kutoka shule uliyosomea ama kadi ya ubatizaji. Yani kanisa pia liko na jukumu. Kwa nini kanisa inahitajika? Sababu kanisa pale ndio ulipewa jina Gerard. Mimi ndio nilipewa Collins. Nilipata kutoka kwa ile pastor, yani mchungaji ndiye aliandika na kupiga sahihi. Kwa hivyo kama huko mtoto wangu hana majina ya kizungu, anaitwa Wanderi. Sasa hahitaji kwamba atoe stakabadhi ya ubatizaji. Haina haja. Yeye hasikumpatia majina ya ubatizo ya kanisa. So huyo hana haja. Lakini mtoto kama ako na jina la kubatizwa, lazima utoe hiyo stakabadhi. Utoe stakabadhi, ama kama pia huna hiyo, unatoa ile stakabadhi ya shule ya kusema kwamba alisomea hapa na alijiita fulani. Umepata zile?
Yes.
Sasa hapo ndio tumezungumza pile wa baba wengine, kama mtoto aliandikishwa kwamba cheti kwamba mtoto ni wako, tafadhali peana ID, kitambulisho. Kipeana kopi ya kitambulisho. Ndio mtoto apate kitambulisho ya kitaifa.
Okay. Haya, umezungumzia familia ambazo zinakutana. Wewe unakuja na watoto, mama anakuja na watoto, unapatana katikati.
Yes.
Kuna wanaume ambao wanasema kwamba sasa watoto wako kwangu, kwa hivyo nataka ya kwamba waweze kuchukua jina langu. Inawezekana kuweza kubadilisha identity ya mtoto?
Inawezekana. Sasa
na pia haki ya mtoto iko hapa pale, kwa sababu nafika mahali ambapo pia mtoto anaanza kujua, anaanza kuwa self aware ya kwamba this is not my biological father. My biological father is someone else. And you can imagine now a child has taken your identity from an identity of a biological father. Now he's taking your identity and he has discarded that. So hapa kidogo kuna kuwa na mambo ya kukinzana.
Hapo ndio kuna kuanga na mvutano. Nataka pia nielezee. Wajua, mimi sioni haja na hainaga haja ya kubadilisha mtoto jina lake kama baba mzazi. Kuna tofauti ya baba mzazi na baba mlezi. There is a reason why I'm speaking much in Swahili today. Ndio watu waelewe. Kuna baba mzazi na baba mlezi. Baba mzazi ndiye yule aliyemzaa,
anaitwa biological
father. Na pia kuna baba mlezi. Mimi kwanza, na tumetumia kipindi hiki mara nyingi kuzungumzia na kusema heko kwa baba walezi. Walezi. Hakuna watu wa maana kama yule baba anakubali kulea watoto ambao yeye sio hakuwazaa mwenyewe. Walizaliwa na wengine, wao wakawatelekeza, lakini yeye akawachukua na kuwalea. Lakini nataka niwaeleze pia baba walezi hapa. Haina haja kubadilisha jina la mtoto. Haina haja kubadilisha jina la mtoto. Kama watoto umekubali. Lakini najua ni kwa nini inaletanga shida pale. Kuna mambo ya kurithi. Kuna mambo ya kurithi. Kwa sababu kama umeelimisha watoto, unaona, na unataka warithi mali yako, ungetaka pia warithi jina lako. Tunaelewana pale?
Sasa kuarithi pia,
sasa pia unataka kuarithi, huwezi kuarithi kama wako na jina la mtu mwingine. Na hapo ndio unakumbuka kuna yule baba aliyejitokeza wakati Samuel Wajiro alipoaga, yule mwanaspoti aliyekuwa na jina kubwa, akasema yeye ni babake. Lakini unajua tayari mtoto alishachukua jina la mama, alikuwa anaitwa Samuel Kamau Wanjiro. Sasa yule mzee kutoka sehemu za Baringo akaambiwa, baba, sasa wewe hukujachangia chochote, kazi yako ilikuwa tu ni kutoa chebe, yani biological raw material ya kutengeneza mtoto. Na pia hapa ndio nataka kuambia pia kina mama, kama baba amekataa mtoto, kama amemtelekeza wakati amezaliwa, usimsukumie. Sababu pia unajinyima haki ya kwamba unaweza patana na mzee mwingine akwambie ni kuja na watoto wako na mimi nitawachukua I will accept them as my own and bring them up. And I want to say this, that when you see a man who is not a biological father of the child, who first wants to adopt the child, because there are many ways of adopting the child. I have talked about Kikuyu culture. I know even in Kalenjin culture, in other cultures, there is a way of adopting those children. Once you have adopted them as their own, when they are children below 18, then it is proper to change their identity. Now, if they already had the birth certificate of the other father, if they are above 2 years, you can only change the identity per law through a deed poll. If they are below 2 years, below 24 months, you can approach the registrar to change the details in the birth certificate. But after 2 years, you can only do that under the Document Registration Act by swearing a deed poll. Yes. Na pia tunasaidia, iko watu wazima pia, si hata watoto. Kuna watu wazima pia mtu anagudua, baba yangu alikuwa fulani. Na baba yake yule fulani, nimekueleza pia kuna wazee wamelea watoto. Na wale watoto wamelea wametubukia kwa ile maji ingine, yani ya pombe na ulevi. Kwamba yule sasa mali yake haina mrithi. Sasa anatafuta mtoto mwenye alizaa huko nje, anamwambia kuje. Sasa ndio yule mtoto arithi huyu baba, inabidi pia abadilishe jina. Ujue pia si mtoto, ni mtu mzima. Sasa ukienda katika ile gazeti rasmi ya serikali, Kenya Gazette, kila si Jumamosi, ni inaitwa nini? Friday, Jumamosi, Ijumaa. Pale Ijumaa utapata kwamba kuna watu wengi wamechapisha kwamba wamebadilisha nini? Majina. Wanatumia mawakili, anabadilisha nini? Jina. Sasa mimi siitwe jina fulani, naitwa jina fulani. Sasa unabadilisha sababu kusilete mtafaruku wakati ya urithi. Umenielewa sasa? Kuna ile unaweza badilisha mtoto akiwa chini ya miaka 2. Na kuna ile unaweza badilisha mtoto akipitisha miaka 2. Vile vile ujue mtoto akikuwa miaka 2 mpaka miaka 17 na miezi 11, anaweza tu kubadilishwa kwa kupitia mama yake ama baba yake. Mama yake ndiye atafanya affidavit, sio mtoto. Mtoto hawezi kufanya affidavit. Hapo nafikiri nimeelezea vizuri. Kwamba mama anaweza badilisha ama baba pia anaweza badilisha. Mimi nimeoa mama, ako na mtoto fulani, mtoto wako na jina tofauti, mimi nataka yule mama na yule mtoto akuwe na jina langu. Sasa sisi wenyewe ndio tutapiga ile kiapo mbele ya wakili ama hakimu, tuseme kwamba huyu mtoto tunataka sasa akuwe na jina hili. Akifikisha miaka 18, akishakuwa mtu mzima, pia yeye mwenyewe ndiye sasa ataswea affidavit. Ndiye atakula ile kiapo ya kusema mimi nimegundua kwamba baba yangu nimelelewa na mzee fulani, lakini baba yangu ni fulani na amenipatia. Sasa pale unajua inaweza pia inabidi saa zingine kukue na pia wale washahidi waongeze nini ile kiapo. Waseme sisi tunajua kwamba huyu mtoto mamake alipoolewa tayari alikuwa ameshazaliwa na alizaliwa kwa nyumba fulani na baba yake ni fulani.
Okay.
So inawezekana.
Tuende pia tuangalie mambo ya responsibilities. Responsibility ya young adult kwa wazazi na reverse also vice versa.
Yes.
Kama mtoto kishafikisha miaka 18,
Yes.
responsibility yake kwa wazazi ni gani na wazazi kwake pia ni gani?
Sasa ujue yule tulisema si mtoto tena. Tunamuita ni mtu mzima wa umri mdogo. Yani kijana na barobaro, awe mwanamke ama mwanaume. Sasa yule akishapitisha miaka 18, mzazi ako na jukumu la kuendelea kumpea makazi na malazi na ulezi kama anaendelea na shule. Okay? Parental responsibility will extend beyond the age of 18 if the child is continuing to go to college or university where he will not be earning. You know, after 18, even after attaining 18, he or she is not earning any money. So pale mzazi anaweza ongezwa na jukumu. Pia ako na jukumu lile. Na akikataa, mtoto yule ama yule kijana barabaro ako na haki ya kwenda mahakama. Na nimetaja kesi moja iliyoamuliwa na mahakama kuu pale Nakuru. Na hiyo ndio kesi pia sisi mawakili tunatumia kuonyesha wazazi kwamba huwezi kataa kulea mtoto zidi ya miaka 18 kama ulikuwa unamlea na hajatimiza ama hajamaliza masomo yake. Pia kama mtoto ni mlemavu, kama mtoto ni mlemavu. Na hapa nataka tusikizane sababu kuna watu wako na watoto walemavu. Unapata mtoto mlemavu amedhulumiwa na kupashwa mimba sana wasichana. Ati sababu wazazi wake pia walimtelekeza sababu ni mlemavu. Lazima pia uko na jukumu kama mtoto ni mlemavu kiakili na kimwili uendelee kumtunza dhidi ya miaka 18. Uko na jukumu la kuendelea kumtunza. Na taifa pia ama serikali inaweza pia kukushurutisha kuendelea kuchunga yule mtoto. Si mtoto ni mtu mzima,
kijana barabara.
Pia vile hawa vijana wako na majukumu kwa wazazi. Kitu ya kwanza, ujue kama wewe uko kijana barabara, kama unaishi na mzazi yako, uko na jukumu la kutii mzazi. Uko na jukumu la kuhakikisha kwamba kuna amani katikati ya wazazi wako na kwa nyumba, kwa jamii. Usilete mtafaruku, kazi ya wazazi. Ukileta mtafaruku ya baba na mama, utapigwa nje. Hiyo ni jukumu na hiyo iko kwa sheria na katiba. Si ati mtoto atasema mimi naweza kugobanisha wazazi wangu. Pia vile ziko hapo kusema kwamba umepitisha miaka 18, usilete vita. Usilete pia vita au upige mama yako ama upige. Na tumeona wakati mwingi kuna watoto wanashikwa, anaishi na mama yake, amepiga mama, anafungiwa ndani ama amepiga baba. Hupaswi kuleta vita katika jamii ama kwa familia. Vile uko na jukumu la kutotumia mihadarati na pombe. Nyumba ya mzazi wako si yako. So, kwa hivyo huna haki ya kukunywa pombe zako ama kutumia mihadarati na kurudi nyumbani na kufanya maisha ya wazazi ikuwe ngumu, ama pia kufanya wazazi wakojeke na waanze kupata ugonjwa wa mpigo wa moyo ati sababu wewe unavuta vitu zingine haziruhusiwi na serikali. Hilo jukumu pia niko na hawa vijana barabara. Wajue kwamba usipotii yale, mzazi ako na haki ya kukufukuza na kukataa kuendelea kulipia shule. Na pia niwaelezee, ukianza mambo ya gono uko na miaka 18, sasa umeanza kutafuta mchuba. Sasa wewe si mtoto tena. Si umeanza kuzaa watoto wengine. Sasa wewe si mtoto.
So utoto wako inaisha hapo.
Sasa utoto yako inaisha. Pia lazima niwaelezee wale wasichana, wewe umeingia katika chuo kikuu ama chuo chochote. Umeenda pale kusoma, si kutafuta mapenzi. Ukianza kutafuta mapenzi na kupachikwa mimba, uwezi rudi kwa mama yako na baba yako umwambie mimi sasa nimepata mimba, mtoto halai mtoto mwingine. Sasa mimi sina jukumu ama kama mzazi, ama hakuna mzazi yote yako na jukumu la kulea wajukuu wake. Hakuna jukumu kama hilo. Kama mzazi wake ako hai, hata kama ni kijana barobaro, inapaswa alide mtoto gani? Na hakuzaa peke yake, alizaa na mwanaume. Kama ukienda uzae na kijana wa miaka 19 kama wewe, hilo ni jukumu lenu. Msirudi nyumbani kwa wazazi wenu ninyi tayari hamjiwezi. Kama hamjiwezi, kwa nini mnafanya gono? Kwa nini mnafanya ngono bila hata kukinga? Sasa pale mnajifurahisha. Ile sasa ni mzaha mnafanya. Na watoto wanaozaliwa kwa mzaha wanaumia sana, Bwana Bitok. Wacha nikueleze. Ukiona mtoto alizaliwa na mtu wako na miaka 18, miaka 19, ule mtoto anaumia. Ujue wale wazazi hawakuwa tayari kumzaa. Sasa inategemea, ule mtoto anategemea upendo wa watu wengine. Yani tuseme mtoto wangu ako na miaka 18 amepata mtoto mwingine. Sasa inategemea mimi nijitolee. Sababu ile mtoto wangu hajiwezi. Sasa ujue ule mtoto mchanga mwenye amezaliwa na yule watoto wadogo na wale wazazi wa umri mdogo, anaumia sana sababu hawana uwezo wa kifedha, hata uwezo wa kimwili, hata uwezo wa kiakili, hata maarifa hawana ya kulea. Unaona? Sasa wale watoto ndio tunasemanga wako na shida itikadi, historical disadvantages, because walianza kwa shida.
The foundation was flawed.
The foundation was wrong. And forever they continue having problems. And sometimes you can see acquired poverty, because when your parents give birth to you when they are poor and when they are not ready, you can actually succeed.
By default you inherit poverty.
You inherit poverty because they are relying on other people to bring you up. And it is very painful. And I like to say this because some of the young parents who are listening to us wanajigamba kwamba umekuwa mtu mzima. Kama hujiwezi, kama huwezi lipa kodi ya nyumba, huwezi jilisha, huwezi nunua nguo, huwezi lipa shule, wewe bado ni mtoto kiakili na kimwili, na unategemea mzazi wako hata kama wewe umefikisha miaka 18. Kwa hivyo chunga sana usipate mtoto mwingine, because ukipata mtoto mwingine unaleta ulemavu wa kihistoria kwa yule mtoto. Unapea yule mtoto shida kuanzia akiwa mchanga mpaka anafikisha miaka 18. And Bitok, we know this, and it's a matter of fact. I am happy and I say this. I was brought up by 2 parents and they are still alive, married for a very long time. I know the advantages I've gotten out of that. And I see the disadvantages some of my relatives who are brought by a single parent have gone through. Yes, I see the disadvantages. So this area I'm passionate about, especially for young adults. Take care of yourself. You are in university to acquire education. You are not there to be loved. Yes, the person telling you they love you when you are 19 and 16 is not even serious. What they are telling you is that I want to have unprotected and careless sex with you. That's actually the message. Because a boy of 18 and 19 or even 20 knows nothing about love. The only thing that drives him is the hormones. And even a girl of 19, 18 knows nothing about love. And but we must also look at the other side of the flip side. I wish Eric was here, because I have asked some of the parents who were unlucky to get children when they were at college. And I have realized some of them tell me, and I see their pain, especially the mothers. They tell me, I was brought up by a single mom, or my father threw us out of the home. So I never understood what it means to grow up with a father. I did not grow up with male cousins, so I did not have the advantage of having a male side of my life. And that's also a disadvantage to particularly to the ladies. Okay, so we need to want to condemn them, because we also need to understand them that the very fact that their fathers abandoned them is the reason they also have a problem in making a distinction between what male or what you call erotic love is, because what they have is the mother's love, and that is one-sided love, because it is feminine all through. But then when they come to a male person telling them that I love you, that's a different type of love.
It triggers them,
and it triggers hormonal imbalance, and all of a sudden you find them mothers when they are still teenagers. So I don't condemn them. Sometimes, in fact, I think they require a lot of support, because it is not their mistake. But the challenge to them, because I'm a parent, I would tell them that now that you've become a young adult, please know, until you are capable of paying your own rent or living on your own, paying your fees and paying your bills, you should not bring another baby into the world. Don't bring another child into the world. Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, there's something you mentioned about relationships, that is teenage relationships, yes, or relationships that are had by young adults who probably might not have the sense of judgment.
Yes.
The question is, and there was a case in Western Kenya where a 17-year-old was having a relationship with another 17-year-old.
Yes.
And somehow they were having coitus, or they were engaging in intimate matters. And out of it, the girl got pregnant, 17. Yes, both of them. Now, the boy was thrown into jail and the girl was left out.
Yes.
How biased is the law when it comes to children?
You know, I blame the magistrate or the judicial officer who was in that. The law is not cast in stone, Bitok. That is why you remember the Supreme Court.
Because it's about children.
Yes, the Supreme Court has ruled in the Muruateto case, and you remember that case was, and the Nyuto case. It was being mentioned during the interviews for the Chief Justice. It's a case that says that where you say that the sentence for this imprisonment, the sentence for this crime is imprisonment. What you're doing is that you're denying the judicial officer the ability to make a decision depending on the circumstances. Okay? These are two young people. They are driven by hormones. And you know hormones. We've been there, Bitok. We've been youth. We know how they can drive you crazy. I mean, and sometimes you cannot be rational or logical in the decisions you make in those circumstances. So therefore, what happens is that a magistrate or a judge ought to be very considerate to know that you're making a jailbird, or you're hardening, you're making a person who's committed what I would call immoral. You know, there is what are called crimes against morality. Crimes against morality. Crimes against morality. The question has always been, whose morality, Bitok? Is your morality better than mine? No. Is the morality of the other community better than mine? We know there are communities in this country where young girls of 14 years get married. We know that, isn't it? They are children. But the law has many times tried to prohibit that, to give the child the right to. Now, we also know that we have an education system which focuses on academic performance. And I want to talk about this because I have been a school manager. That there's children who've been made to repeat primary school because what does it mean who kupita kwenda hiyo class ingine? Si tunaelewana hivyo. So by the time the young person is the young person, sometimes we have young people who even leave primary school at 16, 17 because their teachers are foolish. And I like the current CS. If there is one thing I've liked about Professor Magoha, is telling the primary school teachers, never make a child repeat. Yes. Okay, we need carpenters and artisans, as I've said. We need smiths. So we don't need them. We need them to get out of the school system and go to polytechnics, go to technical institutes. And they're not going to do this by you keeping them in primary school. Because you are forcing them to learn theory. Yes. That may not be what they're interested in. I hope CBC will resolve this. So my take here is that the judge and the judicial officer was very wrong. You look at the circumstances after the decision in the Muruateto and the Nyuto case by the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal, it is very clear that you need to exercise discretion. And you can exercise discretion. And we've got instances. The other day we had a lady who killed her husband for repeatedly battering her. So the day he came and took a panga, she also took a knife. And in the fighting, because he was drunk and he fell, he slipped and she put a knife through his I don't know whether it was intentional, but the court jailed her for 1 day. Court jailed for her for 1 day. That is exercise of discretion. So having two 17-year-olds having sex, they haven't killed anybody. Personally, I would say the offense is wrong. The offense has been committed. But in sentencing, I would exercise leniency and perhaps sentence him, for example, to community service, even for a month.
Because the question is, are you not also denying the child a father?
Yes, exactly. You know, you are actually actually committing causing the commission of another offense. You know, you're actually forcing another bigger problem for society. You know, magistrates are not supposed. That's why we say social scientists, lawyers, anthropologists, even BCom people, we are not supposed to create problems for society. We are supposed to be social engineers to give solutions. So, as you rightly say, whoever condemned that child to jail actually caused a bigger problem. Because you are making them a hardcore criminal. You know, you may even cause him to be sodomized in prison, and then he now becomes a different individual. At the same time, you are denying a young baby a biological father, because after 17, after 18, he will become an adult. Yes, and he should take over his responsibilities as a father. But condemning him to jail is not a solution. Yes, you have a right to exercise jurisdiction, to exercise discretion, and give a sentence that guards, that actually condemns the activity, but at the same takes terms and right of the cognizance of the rights of the baby.
Okay.
Yes.
Alright. Asante sana, it's been a pleasure having you, Kapteni. Sijui kama uko na maneno mwisho ndio kuzungumzia.
Sasa
Kenya wetu.
Nilisikia watu
Ajua umekaliwa wanaume sana, nafaa kwanza ukaliwa mama pia kidogo.
No, wanaume saa zingine.
Geuza kama chapo.
You know, we talked the other day about the way of men. The way of
men.
I still believe, like the sages who said that a nation of strong men is a strong nation. If men take responsibility for their actions, we talk. My father may not be one of the known people. He was not a chief. He's an ordinary person. I may be a lawyer. I may have graduated 4 times from university. But can I tell you something today? When my father speaks, I shut up and I listen. When he speaks, I shut up and I listen. Because he taught me what it means to be a man. Beyond the paying for my education, he taught me character. He taught me not to be a thief. He taught me not to take things which belong to other people. He taught me not to be petty and to even keep following other men, you know, or even talking about other men. And that's why sometimes you may find that I have aversion to talking politics, because talking politics, you're essentially talking about other men and women. I want to talk about myself and what we have done as ourselves, or even as a family. That's what my father taught me. He taught me character. If I walk in the village, I know I have not picked anybody's anything. Very important. He has never stolen to feed me. You know, limitations he had, we went through them. And he taught me that whatever little you have, that is what belongs to you. That is the respect I have for him. So I can never, and I'll never replace him with anybody else. Yes. That is, and I have along the way, I've also met other men who've taught me character. And I have a mentor even today. The other day I called my mentor. My mentor is not a lawyer, for your information.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he's a banker. He's an accountant by profession, but now he chairs a bank. He chairs a bank, board of a bank. And I talk to him, but sometimes on a monthly basis. Even when we've not talked, I tell him, sir, can we have lunch? Because I also want to learn from the fountain of his knowledge. And he's also been insisting on me that please, kama uko na watoto pahali fulani, make sure they are okay. Hata kama ulizaa watoto na mama akaenda akaolewa, fuatilia ujue wanafanya nini kwa maisha. That is a challenge he gives to me because of the things we've talked about. Now I've seen a lot of people are talking about this debate about the High Court ruling. I simply want to say this. There is an appeal that has been filed against that ruling, okay? I have my own opinion. I particularly have been very silent on the issue of the whole thing of the constitutional change, because I hold an opinion which is contrary to a lot of people. First, I believe a society can change its constitution because it is what you call the Grundnorm. It is what we've agreed with the people we've given the limited mandate to govern us and to look after our resources. So you cannot cast it in stones and say it can never be amended. Because where, and it is rightly so, the reason why some countries have gone to war, you know, in 1952, Eritrea was an independent state. It was an independent state. It was semi-autonomous, and they formed a union with Ethiopia. And therefore, Emperor Haile Selassie became the emperor for the entire region. But the Eritreans had their own semi-autonomous parliament, just like Zanzibar has. In 1962, the emperor of Ethiopia changed the constitution and declared that the Ethiopia is a unitary empire, an empire state. And he was an emperor. You remember it was not a republic because it had an emperor, hereditary empire, Haile Selassie. And what happened? The Eritreans, the Eritrean Liberation Front, it is called Jabha al-Tahrir al-Eritrea in Arabic, went to Sudan and launched a war. Then later on, another group emerged, called it the EPLF. In Eritrea, they call it Sha'abia al-Tahrir. There is one which was called the Front, another one is the People's Front. And they fought for 29 years until 1991 to amend that constitution and to become again an independent republic. It can be that painful when you say that a constitution is cast in stone. That's number one. Number two, I want to say this. I don't want to get into the issues of BBI. That the constitution itself, in our constitution, says you can amend it under Article 255. But again, it prescribes, and we talked about this here, under Article 256 and 257. Article 256 is simply parliamentary initiative. Parliamentarians, because they are the people's representatives, they exercise delegated authority, can propose amendments, but there are certain sections of the constitution they cannot amend without going back to the people. Okay, and therefore there was no problem of even wanting to amend through parliamentary initiative to go to there and then say we amend, but this power is reserved for the people. So we take it to the people. So I don't know the wisdom, because I was not consulted as a lawyer. I don't know the wisdom of the people who decided to start something which had both the state participating and you get. But for me, and the government, as a lawyer, I got a problem when I saw state officers, principal secretaries, writing to staff under their parastatals and ministries, asking them to sign. At that point, I actually stopped talking about it because I knew something is wrong. I knew something is wrong. And that's an opinion I hold. And I don't want to hold it even as a lawyer. I hold it even as a voter. I do not want a chief. I was there when we were forced to report to chiefs when in the last days of the Moi government, when I was at the university. And the chiefs really treated us like children of a third god, as if we don't belong to this country. So I'd never want a chief to be told to make me sign anything. That I got a problem with. And that for me became the departure. Not with the process, but I just knew that somewhere along the way, since I was not consulted as a lawyer, something is wrong, because I can read Article 257 and know that it has nothing, no state organ, no state officer should be involved in making me decide. In making me
decide about your own constitution.
Decide about.
Now, the question is, as Wakili,
yes.
Now, by the HG appealing,
yes,
are they not falling into the trap that they are being accused of? Because
perhaps
you cannot exonerate yourself and say, no, this is not a government process. It is a Wanjiku process. Then you have the government appealing the decision.
You see,
are they falling into the trap?
Yeah, that's why I've said. There is what we call in constitutional change and in constitutional making, there is something we call a conceptual framework. A conceptual framework, even to amend the constitution. I don't want to talk about what the AG is doing. I want to say that from the conceptual framework and what now everything that followed, the proposal, whether the proposal was done by the president or by the former prime minister, it was okay, because we know there is an issue, isn't it? But once you make that proposal, then you create a body that creates a conceptual framework. This is the road we need to use. But you don't start then using state organs, including the Attorney General, who is a state officer, to then move this, because he ought to play zero part if you're making it. But I said they had the right to move it through Parliament. And through Parliament,
they would have the parliamentary initiative.
Yeah, they would have amended the parts they thought are good and which their power allows them. Then remit the part which they cannot amend to the population. And I want to insist that a constitution should be amendable at all times, because the opposite of not making it possible to amend makes people now use extra legal means to amend the Constitution. And that is the problem. Whether, the AG is an advisor to the government. We talk there are 6 schools of thought in law. 6 schools of thought. I belong to 1 or 2. I don't know what school of thought he belongs. I have read some of the rulings, his rulings in the Court of Appeal, when he was a judge of the Court of Appeal. I am yet to place him where he belongs. I know where some of the judges belong. For example, the newest judge of the Supreme Court, Justice William Ouko. Justice William Ouko was a magistrate. He made certain rulings. He became the chief registrar. Then he became the chief court administrator. Okay, then became the registrar. Then a judge of the High Court. So he has made pronouncements where I'm able to follow his school of thought. I also know the school of thought of some of the judges, but some of them, it's impossible to know because they haven't made pronouncements which make it possible for even lawyers to deceive. So some of the lawyers were going headlong and saying the state is right or the judges were right. First, sometimes I like to ask them, what school of law do you belong to? You cannot just say so and so is right simply because it is the side that pays you. No, I am not paid by the state, Bitok. I make my own money. I have clients. My clients are not politicians, majority of them. So I am beholden to nobody in politics. In fact, I say I am beholden. I have said it in this show. I have sworn the oath to defend the Republic of Kenya, never to defend individuals. Yes, when I swore an oath, when I was trained as a military person, when I took the oath, when the former President Daniel Arap Moi commissioned me and constituted me as a military officer, I never swore an oath to defend him. I swore an oath to defend the people and the Republic of Kenya. So my oath of office, even as a lawyer, I look at the side where the people will gain. So the people, yes, need to amend the Constitution. The people have a right to amend it. But then if you get it wrong at the conceptual framework of how the roadmap of amending, then as any judge will tell you that if procedure is wrong, then everything done wrongly is wrong. It's null and void. But some of the people I have heard saying, oh, can you salvage? Yes, you can salvage. If the proposals are so good, there are those which need only parliamentary initiative. Why don't you take them there and amend them? Yes. If you convince 2/3 of both houses of parliament, then you amend the sections that require you to amend. Because personally, I have a problem where this constitutional change ought to have been consensus. Constitutional change is for us. It's not for politics. And that is again a problem I have. I don't want one side saying we won. It's nonsense. For me, it is balderdash. Any lawyer who even says that, even when you call any lawyer here and he says their side won, tell him he's simply propagating nonsense because we are not at war. It's peacetime. So we ought to negotiate. A constitution is a negotiated contract. And both sides ought to feel they've won. Both sides need to feel they've won. That we've gained this, we've gained this. You get?
There's a compromise.
There's a compromise. That is a consensus building. So any lawyers who are even shouting in the media or even political hirelings shouting in the media, you can never be more foolish than that. By thinking that your side will win, therefore you think the other side should lose. Then you're not creating a country. I never swore to divide this country. I swore to defend Kenya in its territorial entirety, the way it is as constituted in the Constitution, as it is known geographically. So I would respect the right of the child in Turkana, the right of the child in Musabweni, in Mandera and Sirari to feel as part and parcel of Kenya. So consequently, if instead of wasting time and causing tension in the country, why don't you amend the parts you think that can be amended through parliamentary initiative? First, it is cheaper. You are dealing with a smaller group. You make the parliamentary seats, take them to Naivasha where you take them, let them reach a compromise and a consensus. And therefore, we make it easier and the public will know that all sides were listened to. We change those parts. The parts which require the public to get involved, Parliament and the speakers are supposed to remit them to IEBC for a referendum. And that is easy. We make it again cheaper, but not make it costly, because when you have tension in the country and political misunderstanding, business suffers. Business
Suffers.
And I talk here now as a businessman and a lawyer we talk. First, I'm a businessman because I operate a business. I don't want to close my office and my other businesses because of politics. So a businessman, we also feed the nation. We pay the taxes so that the state can run its programs. So we want our business to continue. So make this thing as cheaper and as peaceful as possible.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Captain. It's been a pleasure having you. It's been another great Monday. Thank you so much for making time and for giving us the grace of your wisdom. And wish you a very blessed day and week. Uendelee kutafuta wisdom ya next. Unaona Eric ameenda kuchanga. Sasa atakuja tupeleke mbio pia. So we need to find a way.
Hata wewe nimesema iko kitabu nitakupatia.
Tafadhali nipe hiyo kitabu hata mimi
nataka uisome. Ni kitabu refu ni ya peji 2000. Ai. So itabidi usome na uandike notes because mimi nikisoma vitabu huwa naandika notes.
Neka notes kando.
Sababu nataka pia kuwa na maelezo nikielezea watu kitu.
Unapata point of references.
Yeah, point of reference because pia elimu yenye pia haina msingi haisaidii.
Ngumu kidogo.
Pia yes.
Thank you so much for coming in, Captain. As usual, we really appreciate you. The class have been online. We really appreciate. Also on Facebook and YouTube. Tunasema asante sana. Thank you so much for tuning in. Without you, the tackle could never be. We really appreciate you. This has been the tackle Common Sense edition 17 May 2021. Monday 17 May 2021. It's been a pleasure having you. Until tomorrow. Tukizungumzia mambo ya sheria kesho pia tuna panel hapa tunajaribu kuangazia na kuweza ku break down the BBI verdict. Until tomorrow, see you and have a blessed day. This is the tackle lens now. Bye bye, signing out.